I have around 7,000 hours in Skyrim and have literally spent over half of my life playing this game. I spend a lot of time in Skyrim doing ludicrous challenge runs and random permadeath runs. What is the best race in Skyrim is a topic often debated in my chat, and honestly, it's not even close. Number 1 is so far ahead of everyone else, it's not even a competition. However, this does not mean that you have to use any of these races. At the end of the day, you can play Skyrim with any build and any race. I checked out some other rankings, and I couldn't believe how incredibly wrong they were. So I want to give you guys a proper list from someone who is actually heavily experienced with the game. Keep in mind, when it comes to racial bonuses, only the passives and racial ability matter. Races starting with extra stats in some skills means nothing, because skills are so easy to level. In fact, starting with a lower skill in your core focus skills is better, since you'll be able to use them to level up quicker and get your build started. I've purely ranked all of these races on how effective they are in general throughout the entire game. It has nothing to do with looks or lore. If you think a race is the best race because you like playing as the kitty, go ahead, right? That's fine. You can make any build work. Fine. Now, in my opinion, the next 4 are borderline useless, or only have really niche abilities that are rarely used for early game. If you're picking any of these 4, it's only for the looks. I am ranking Wood Elf as the worst race in Skyrim, although it is very close, as the next spot isn't far off. 50% disease resist is completely worthless, and the 50% poison resist is at best okay. The only enemies in the game that do poison damage are spiders and chorus and Falmer. Beyond early game, this doesn't really help much. Finally, their racial ability, Command Animal, allows them to make an animal an ally for 60 seconds, which is also borderline useless, and outside of the wounded giant spider inside Bleak Falls Barrow, you will probably never need this. Also, Wood Elves are the smallest playable race, which in turn means they have the lowest movement speed in the game, and, over the course of an entire playthrough, that really does add up. I genuinely can't believe how highly everyone else seems to rank High Elves in Skyrim. On paper, they look like the best choice if you want to do a mage build. However, their abilities are counterintuitive to how you build and play a magic-based build in Skyrim anyway. Let's start off with the plus 50 Magicka. It's okay, but this is effectively just 5 free levels without any perk points or the choice of where your stats go. Leveling up in Skyrim is not difficult, and you do not need a high Magicka even as a pure mage build, because if you're playing a mage, you should be focused on cost reduction anyway. Their racial ability allows them to recover Magicka 25 times faster for 60 seconds, but the problem is, Conjuration and Illusion don't need much Magicka regen, as most of their spells will be used before the fight begins, or rarely during combat. Restoration is only used as a last resort if you're losing. Alteration doesn't need Magicka regen investment either, as the only ability you're going to be spamming in the middle of combat is Paralysis. And if you are doing that, you're probably built around Alteration cost reduction anyway, right? Destruction is the only school of magic that needs a steady stream of Magicka, but it's also useless even for Destruction, because as a Destruction-focused build, you will use Enchanting to put Destruction cost reduction on your necklace, ring, helmet, and chest piece for 100% cost reduction, so your spells don't cost anything anyway. The funniest part about everyone else ranking High Elves highly is that none of them mention what is the best part of High Elves, and that is the fact that they are the tallest race, meaning they have the highest base movement speed out of everyone, which makes them solid for something like a Stealth Archer build, or builds that are generally slower. Imperials are quick and simple, useless. Their passive ability helps them find more gold in chests, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is only an extra 10% of what you find, up to 10 gold. Maximum. Their racial ability allows them to calm nearby enemies for 60 seconds, which is niche enough to cheese some easy kills or even make a quest giver you accidentally attacked and aggroed, chill out long enough for you to, finish handing in a quest or get the next quest before moving on. Still very niche, but slightly more versatile than the Nord's ability. Okay, I know a lot of people will be upset about this one, but I'm sorry, Khajiit doesn't do anything. Sure, they're ranked this high purely because they get a bonus 12 points of unarmed damage, but even that is still niche outside of early game brawls. Even if you're doing an unarmed build, the majority of your damage is going to be coming from enchanting unarmed damage on your equipment, and the Fists of Steel perk mixed with blacksmithing. I don't care how many people tell me how good their racial ability is, I've never touched the brightness settings in Skyrim, and I've never had a problem seeing anything in the game. As far as I'm concerned, this is by far the worst racial in the game, and I think that the fact that it is the only racial ability that can be used multiple times per day, that only helps to prove my point. Now this is 100% the most controversial pick on this list, as all the experienced Skyrim players are probably pulling their hair out on this one. But hear me out. The 25% magic resistance is by far the best passive ability that any race in Skyrim gets. It is very powerful, and magic resist is completely necessary on higher difficulties like Master and Legendary. But because of how necessary magic resist is on those difficulties, it is actually required. You are going to enchant it onto your ring and necklace for that 40% plus resist. If you get the Lordstone, which can be found southeast of Morthal, it gives you a bonus 25%, and then by getting the Agent of Mara buff in Riften, you get a bonus 15%. All of this together, based on your enchanting, you can get 80 to 85% magic resist on any race easily, 85% magic resistance being the cap in Skyrim. Meaning that while the 25% magic resist is very strong, it's nothing that all the other races can't achieve themselves. Their racial ability allows them to absorb 50% of magicka from hostile spells for 60 seconds, which itself is fairly niche and nothing crazy. When I was looking at all the races and ranking them for this list, this one honestly surprised me, because I've always assumed that Redguard was just useless and never bothered using them. The 50% poison resist here is just as mediocre as it is on Wood Elf, but the ability Adrenaline Rush lets them regenerate stamina 10 times faster for 60 seconds, which is by no means insane, as you could just eat vegetable soup if you were like that desperate for stamina, but it is overall useful enough to make it better than all the previous races in my opinion, as it's the only ability so far which is usable throughout the entire game and isn't something that all the other races could achieve too if they wanted. Argonian this high also feels wrong, just because of how much of a frickin' joke water breathing is. Not only is there no incentive to ever go underwater in Skyrim, let alone long enough to need water breathing, but there are both potions and an enchantment which give everyone else the same thing, even if it was good. Honestly, water breathing should have been like a 25% movement buff underwater or something like that. It would still be pretty much useless, but like at least it would be something that, is noticeable. Also, once again, the 50% disease resist is worthless as well. However, Argonians do also get a boost to unarmed damage. Not as much as Khajiit do, but enough for it to be as useful early game as it is for them. Their ability Hiskin lets them recover 10 times HP per second, which once again is nothing insane, but it is just good enough to the point that it puts them above most of the other races, especially decent while trying to set up your build early game. Nord of course is a little basic, and as I mentioned earlier, I don't rate their racial ability very highly. It makes enemies flee from battle for 30 seconds, which is fine for cheesing out easy kills on weaker enemies, but it also doesn't work on enemies way stronger than you. You can't use it as a get out of jail free card if you're in a bad spot against like a really dangerous enemy. So the early game when it is, actually viable, it's still not great. The 50% frost resist, however, is actually really solid. Skyrim being Skyrim, frost is a very common magic type. So overall, can't complain. Okay, my reasoning for this one is actually pretty solid, so hear me out. Everyone in Skyrim will either choose Werewolf or Vampire Lord. If you're playing as a mage-focused class, you're more than likely going to choose Vampire Lord because of the obvious synergies. Dark Elf's passive 50% fire resist basically negates Vampire's inherent 50% fire weakness, in turn making Dark Elf, in my opinion, the best pick for magic-focused builds. And Vampire-focused builds. Even if you're not playing as a mage / spellsword, or even as a vampire, the 50% fire resist is still a very solid passive for early game Skyrim, between dragons and traps. The racial ability is useless, though, and not worth using. If Orc isn't your choice for the best race in Skyrim, you are literally insane. The Orc racial ability gives you 2 times damage and 50% damage reduction for 60 seconds. There is not a single ability or spell in the game that comes anywhere close to giving you as much value. Every single melee build variation is 100 times stronger and better off being an Orc over any other race. Two-handed? Orc. Dual-wield one-handed? Orc. Sword and board? Orc. Sneak dagger? Orc. Hell, I play Orc even if I'm doing an unarmed run too, just for the damage reduction from Berserker Rage. The Orc racial is just as strong on a level 500 min-maxed legendary tier character as it is on a level 1 brand new novice difficulty build leaving Helgen. If you combine this with the quick waiting tip, which you can find in my video, over there, you can, it's up there, it's up there, it's a good video, you should watch it, you should like it and also comment, and then also share it with 15 friends. And then if any of those friends are like, this video is bad, unfriend them, because they're not cool people. And you don't need that sort of negativity in your life. But if you're using that quick waiting tip, the buff might as well be permanent too. Orc doesn't get any passives outside of like Bloodkin, which just allows instant access to Orc strongholds. But that's not that useful, and also every other race can also achieve Bloodkin by like helping them out or whatever, so it's nothing crazy. Berserker Rage is all Orcs need to be number 1. I've also gone ahead and included this tier list too, as I think it's a better way of showing off the different races' strengths comparatively. Honestly, 10 to 7 I don't think are worth playing unless you like how they look aesthetically outside of really niche roleplay builds or absolute min-maxed builds such as Khajiit Unarmed. Then 6 to 3 I think are solid choices you can't really go wrong with, and then 2 is nowhere near as strong as Orc, but I think the passive does way more than most other builds, especially for the vampire players out there. And then of course Orc is just ridiculously strong. Thank you so much for watching. If there are any other important details I may have missed on why certain race should be ranked higher, feel free to let me know. Although, anyone claiming that there is a race that is better than Orc is just outright trolling. I think there is room for the other 9 races to slide up and down depending on how you play or what you like to use, but I genuinely cannot see any argument for any race even being close to what Orc is.